And then we could also do some future planning for a more resilient downtown in the future. So as we have other things that come forward, we wanted to establish a collective way in which we could do that work. So you may recall that we pulled together 7 organizations that are listed ahead of you and with here with me today to form the Downtown Rochester Task Force. We created a way and a path through this. We used a 90-day community engagement plan. We did it in a way that was quicker than a normal engagement plan, but we built it so that we could get information quickly from our stakeholders, gather that information, then synthesize it, get it back to them. Do we hear you correctly? What are we missing? Bring that information back. And that was an iterative process. We use that to help find 4 major themes and sub-themes. So that could help us begin to prioritize and understand where the priorities and the stakeholders' needs were, and then how could we start to solve problems within those areas. So in May, you may recall we came to the group and shared that there was 4 main themes that we heard from our community as concerns that are listed in front of you, and then some sub-themes. We took that information then and created an action plan from those. In your packets, what we included was a couple different things with this. We included the original report and then a shortened 60-day report that dove into those themes and sub-themes. So what have we accomplished so far? I wanted to touch just base on a few things, and then I'm going to ask task force members to come up and share what they have been working on as well. During the past 6 months, our task force has continued to meet on a regular basis. This was really important for a number of reasons. We wanted to stay focused on this work. We wanted to lean into our strengths, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't go back into our silos. That was one of the challenges often that a business might come to one organization and say, I'm having this very specific challenge, but without working together, we could not solve that. And so we wanted to make sure that this model came through as we continue to work on these needs, is that we were meeting regularly together and problem solving together, so we didn't go into those silos. We wanted to make sure that we were solving for the community concerns that were brought before us, and again, they were complex. And so when we worked on this work together, we often had subgroups and teams that were problem solving and working together. And then we wanted to also troubleshoot for immediate needs as well. We were given a set of list of things that our stakeholders wanted, but we also know that immediate issues were coming up. So for example, construction mitigation was something that came up, and it wasn't the actual construction, but it was, this example specifically was the movement of the buses, which created empty bus stops, which created extra vandalism and things that needed to be cleaned and picked up. So we were able to quickly come together, figure out a problem, identify who was in charge of what piece, and solve for it quickly. So we tried to play with that model of how we were working together, not only to solve the items in the task force, but use that to our advantage when we were solving most immediate challenges as well. So with that, I'll ask members of the task force to come up and just share a few highlights of things that they have been working on, and we'll just maybe go in this order if that sounds okay for the group. So I'll ask Kathleen Harrington with the RDA to free step forward, and then the rest of the group can come up as we get through each list.
Thank you, Jamie. Madam Chair, members of the council, administrator. We have 2 minutes, so I'm going to be brief, and I'm trying not to get too New York and talk too fast, but I'm so excited for the opportunity to be here because I cannot stress enough to all of you the impact that the work of the task force has had with the input from the stakeholders and this funnel of continuing input for stakeholders. So I can say unequivocally for the RDA that it has had a profound effect, and it's really changed how we look at the mission. And I thank the mayor for her advice on the advisory board, and I think she can attest to this. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but we have really changed. The stakeholders said loud and clearly, we don't want the RDA to be simply an events machine, an events organization. The RDA should be a promotional organization. Events are one of the tools, but be a promotional organization, creating a brand for downtown Rochester that is marketed to visitors, residents, tourists near and far. And that's what we've been working on for the past 7 months and will continue to do. And I'll have the opportunity to speak to you more tonight about the operating plan looking into 2024. But so we now look at events as a platform to promote the brand, not just to get attendance for the one-time wonder of the event, but to create return visits, to create opportunities for more overnight visits, helping our restaurants and our hotels and our retailers. In addition to changing how we look at events, we're also changing how we look at the seasons of the year and the complications seasons such as winter brings to the economy of downtown. So you will see us really looking at promotions. We're about to launch on this coming Friday, the holiday season promotion with the iconic event of Here Comes Santa. It's not going to be a one-time wonder. That will be the first of events every single weekend throughout the holiday season, hopefully getting people downtown to celebrate, to enjoy the great restaurants, unique shopping, and always lots to do. So I'll just share with you our visual identity that we're going to plaster all over Olmsted County. And I look forward to speaking with you later tonight. And I can't express how much I personally appreciate the opportunity to work with all of my colleagues on the task force, because the collective impact is so much greater than the impact of each of us alone. Thank you.
Hi there. Good afternoon, Madam President, Mayors of Council. I'm Joe Ward from Experience Rochester, and I will be up here in about 3 weeks, I guess, to give you a much more detailed report annually on the work that we've done. Just really want to highlight the collaboration. Oftentimes tourism kind of gets left out on the side of like, we're not really an economic development partner. We are, but a lot of people like to think we're not. So it was really nice to be invited to the table, but also to be able to convene the table at the Mayo Civic Center for these meetings. And I wouldn't say it's actually forced us to do all of our business differently, like Kathleen has said, and they've learned a lot. For us, it's to continue to realize the magnitude of the impact that the Mayo Civic Center and its success has on the city, but on the community. We hear from restaurants and shops, especially going back to the COVID lockdowns, about missing those groups and missing those people. So, for this year, it started off with us for Restaurant Week, and a new and novel idea to promote the restaurants, to try to bring people down with the idea, and that was just before the task force got going, actually, with that idea to activate downtown better, knowing that we've lost a lot of restaurants over the last couple of years, but now we're gaining them. Can't do a lot about the ones that are gone, unfortunately, but we can do a lot about the ones that are right here and help them be successful. There's a lot of diversity in the new restaurants we have and the new retail shops, and so we're really glad to support that. I would say of the partners that we work with most, we're really RDA, because we're in the promotion and activation space together. So this year, when Thursday's Downtown closed up a little early, we decided to have 3 events live after 5 at the Mayo Civic Center. Now, we didn't have 10, 20,000 people, but that's okay. We wanted to make sure that was a day and a date that stayed on the calendar for free music, free access, cultural food, and seeing a lot of you folks out, as well as people in the community. And so I think you'll see us continue to take a look this summer. It's funny how we have these 2 worlds. Sometimes we can think when there's no live entertainment going on in the summer, because all these groups want to be out at the amphitheaters, we can sit and think about like, wow, we have nothing going on. And then I got out to the restaurants this summer for lunch and heard all about, you were busier than ever. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they remembered because the Jehovah's Witnesses were back. And that was a big group for us, but they're not necessarily the largest revenue generator for the Mayo Civic Center. But our restaurant saw these folks for 4 weeks in a row. So sometimes it's just continuing to do some of the business that we do, but do it better with an eye on something new. And I really just want to say thank you to the partners and to council for getting this discussion going, because though things are getting better in our community, really we're all going to hold each other accountable to remember to meet, to remember to talk. I think I come with the same disclaimer Kathleen does from New York, talk a little too much, and maybe I speak up a little, but I do want to make sure that we are continually invited to that discussion, because I think if you build a community that people want to visit, you build a community that people want to open a business, and you build a community that people want to live in. And I'm proud here now for 4.5 years to be in this community, and all these partners here and yourselves are the key people to continue to make that work happen. So look forward to more. And again, I'll see you all in about 3 weeks or so to hear the report specifically on Experience Rochester. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Council President Carlson, members of the council, Mayor Norton. My name is Ryan Parsons. I'm with the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. I'll really be breaking down our efforts in the downtown task force really into three core areas. So the first is mitigating the impact of construction. So what that is making sure that we're convening discussions that relate to some of those construction projects that can impact traffic either in downtown or the arteries to downtown. So that includes the MnDOT construction project, which involves Highway 14 and Broadway, all the way up to the Broadway project that has the Silver Lake Bridge. While not officially in downtown, they do feed downtown, and there are significant impacts with those. So we'll continue to do that role as well. Communication is a big one. So excellent partners throughout the downtown task force. Everybody is doing such great work. How do we tell the story of that? Jamie and DMC have done an excellent job, as well as other partners. One thing that we look to do on our side is take advantage of our reach. We do have a strong reach as the Chamber of Commerce, so we make sure that we share that information, yes, with downtown stakeholders, but also with those stakeholders that are outside of the downtown area, including the region. Because if we want to fix some of those issues downtown, you're going to need the traffic, you're going to need the customers coming downtown, so we got to tell that story. Beyond that, also taking part in discussions around parking, improving that. And, you know, I believe I'll just finish on the note of the economic growth bucket that exists within the downtown task force. You know, a big part for us recently has been advocating for the renewal of Rochester's local sales tax. While that is throughout Rochester, the economic growth that really brings about, that can be huge potential that can also impact the downtown area. So I am not from New York, I'm from the Midwest, so I will keep it very brief and look forward to connecting with you all as we proceed.
Good afternoon, Cindy Steinhauser, City of Rochester. So the previous speakers and the ones coming after me, you'll hear a lot about what are we doing to bring people downtown, reactivate downtown. And that's really where the city role comes in terms of how do they experience downtown from an access perspective, as well as what came out of the downtown task force in terms of barriers to doing business downtown. So I'll speak to both, to the access and the barriers, because that's where our work has really been happening. Specifically under access to downtown, it's very much about the physical access, specifically in the area of parking. And you recall, we had a really successful partnership last year in terms of free holiday parking through last holiday season. You as a council body elected to do that again this year. And I think as you hear what's coming up from RDA and what's been happening, there's really great synergy with that decision. And so that's the kind of, when we say we're working together better, we're making more informed decisions. They're more contemplative, they're more interconnected. That's a perfect example of that. And to coincide with that, you've also made the commitment to do increased security in the parking ramps as well. So those two decisions are again in alignment what we're hearing in terms of wanting to what came out of the task force and aligning with increased activity. There's also continuing to do some work with our consultants, Walker Consulting, to understand what other kinds of parking adjustments we might make and the feasibility of those adjustments. I think that will be a longer term, what I've just talked about short term, that's a longer term assessment of what we need to do over the next 12 to 18 months in terms of the parking system to better respond to that. Wayfinding is another piece when we think about access for activities in downtown. And so in light of course, Mayo's big announcements, Mayo Bold Forward Unbound, and the rebound that we've been seeing in commercial activity and downtown development, top of mind for all of the partners here, including many city teammates, are how do we help people understand what it's going to be like to experience navigating downtown during construction and post downtown. So I don't have a very specific update in that, just know that it is a very active conversation. We are looking at tools in terms of how do we support wayfinding as construction happens, and thinking about coordination of technology tools like GIS, storyboarding, a complaint resolution tracking system, HubSite, and other data technology that allows us to make data-driven decisions around and measuring and understanding the impact of navigating and make adjustments that we make in terms of accessing downtown. One final thing in terms of access to downtown, because it also safety was also a component of that. And of course, and hopefully Randy will speak to it, is the great partnership. There's final details between Mayo Clinic and Rochester Police Department on a temporary police substation having a presence in downtown. And so that will also be a really great initiative coming up in the next few months. The second item is barriers to doing business downtown. And when we talk about this, we think both regulatory barriers as well as coordination. I talked about the construction coordination and the technology tools that we're evaluating and how we can measure that. But it's really been a fun exercise because this has allowed us, give us a fresh spotlight and a renewed conversation as our team in terms of what truly are barriers, and not being defensive about it, but just understanding the climate in which we're living in and how we modify those barriers. So a lot of work's been done in the space around parklets, sidewalk and street cafes. Streamlined, found about 5 different application processes out there. We've streamlined those, developed a user guide. We'll be bringing an update on that so that we're ready for the next warm weather season. I know it's November, but we're already thinking about spring and that kind of business activation. And then the clerk's office has done a comprehensive review of their licensing process and identified ways in which they think they can improve that approval process. And I'm excited to be working with Kelly on that. And I know that she'll be bringing something forward in one of the upcoming council meetings around that. So lots of behind the scenes work that we know is going to really impact doing business downtown, particularly as businesses are bouncing back. So with that, Randy.
Madam President, Mayor, Administrator, Council members, Randy Schubring, Community Engagement Mayo Clinic. You heard from us last month on our 5-year plan that we actually employ 30,000 employees in downtown, actually 20 in the downtown and another 10 at St. Mary's. So we really look to that our employees as adding to the vitality of downtown. One of the things we've seen since April when we lifted our mask mandate is a lot more of our employees as well as our patients moving through the downtown. So that's very encouraging going forward. Cindy mentioned that we're working with the city on some vacant office space as a temporary substation to ensure a sense of safety downtown. A couple other things that we're working on is we're working with our Kathleen and RDA on trainings for our patient experience volunteers. And actually having them move through downtown and get familiar with the new establishments down there. So working on that. And as mentioned earlier, we're also working with the city and DMC on what comes next from Mayo Clinic on potential major development and ensuring that that there's strong communication between the city, Mayo Clinic, and all groups on construction as it moves forward. It's going to be difficult, but we think there's going to be some exciting stuff at the end. But we really are focused on the immediate concerns. So with that, I will turn it over to John. Is he here? Yep, there he is.
Thank you very much. My name is John Wade. I'm president of Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated. I'm President, Mayor Norton, Administrator Zelms. Thank you for the opportunity. Most importantly, thank you for the opportunity to work together with this group of people. One of the senses you're getting out of all of this is we have our act together and we're all heading in the same direction. And I like to talk about growing gains, and we are growing them. And for those of you that get to travel once in a while, you know that this is a pretty remarkable city. And we are very bullish on the future. And so, and you'll hear Patrick talk a little bit about this because we focus probably in that traditional economic development area, business assistance, startup, but also how do we best utilize the space we have downtown? How can we activate that space downtown? How can we attract people to utilize that space in the downtown area? We also talk about attracting the attractors. We know that while we are incredibly blessed to have the world's premier medical practice in our downtown, we also need other unique opportunities for people, not only the residents of Rochester, but the patients and visitors that also want to experience all that this community has to offer. And we're committed to doing that as well. So whether that's housing at all affordability levels, or that's activating office space or attracting businesses or helping them grow here, we're committed to doing that. But most importantly, I think when you get really good people together, all pulling in the same direction, I commend the mayor, the city for helping us do that through this task force. It really does work. And we are all committed to doing that. And that's a wonderful thing for the community. So thank you very much. I think Patrick C. is up next.
Madam Chair, members of City Council, Mayor. Hubert Humphrey once famously said, everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. So, so let me just make some additional comments that you may have heard through others' presentations. We really organized our work around promoting and communication. You heard from Kathleen and from Joe around access and barriers. You heard that report from Cindy and the work that the city administration and you as the city council have taken on, and the work that we're doing to grow downtown. That John at Ready and DMC has committed to lead. We've really been working at that at two levels. One is, as John said, attracting the attractors. What makes for a successful downtown is when there's market demand, when there's regular market demand. And that usually constitutes people who work in a downtown, people who learn in a downtown, people who live in a downtown, people who visit a downtown for special occasions, and then the occasional, what I call destination retail, very special retail. So we've been working on all fronts to elevate that. And we know we've had, as every downtown, a setback in the number of downtown workers, but lots of reason to be optimistic about the growth and the return of downtown workers. We know about the value of having students in a downtown. The most vibrant downtowns are ones that have students, and we've seen the growth of the downtown student population, particularly with the residents now at former Doubletree. Residents, people who live downtown, spend 7 times as much in the downtown as a downtown worker. So for every person that we can create housing to live downtown, they replace or add 7 times as much as a downtown worker. Entertainment, special events, the Civic Center, at the Civic Music, at Civic Theater, at the Chateau, which we're seeing it really come into its own, really add the vitality, and maybe perhaps attracting other special cultural institutions, Children's Museum perhaps. Wouldn't that be great to have in the downtown as adding a sort of vitality that comes with special events? And then destination retail. All of the retail collectively makes for a special place. But in some communities and some markets, having what I would call destination retail, like a cultural hub, a cultural marketplace, might be an example of something that we could work towards. So working at that level of growing the demand in the market, simultaneously working at the sort of ground level, the Main Street Grant Program, which predated the initiation of the task force, but certainly was consistent with the task force, brought $4 million into Rochester, supported 71 businesses as they built or grew in the downtown. And so we're beginning to see, I think, a resurgence and a rebuilding of the downtown vitality. Would you believe it that there are 20 new businesses that have opened in the past year in the downtown? Just think about it. The Well, the Marrow, our Paladar, 507 Public House, Bebop, Everyday 365, True Queens Boutique, Fresh and Green, Latitude 44, Papa's Popcorn, soon to come Ruth Chris, Mill City Kitchen in the former Pescara space, Semba Gallery returning. This is Food Union, Homemade Natural Beauty and Boutique, Pebble Spas opening soon, expansion of Nordic Shop. All of these are either new or refreshed or growing businesses in our downtown. So the narrative about downtown ought to be one of optimism and enthusiasm and support. And I want to thank you and the task force members, but particularly I want to thank the downtown businesses who have worked so hard to really create the special place that downtown can be. Thank you.
We just have a few more slides and then hope to get to discussion. I want to thank the task force members for sharing those updates. Something else that we've been paying a lot of attention to is how downtowns are different. And we've had the opportunity to do a lot of learning from other downtowns. Now that there's more data coming out and even in our own experiences, something that the task force members hear me talk a lot about is that downtowns are no longer obligations, they're destinations. We were required at one point to come downtown Monday through Friday for your job, and now you're choosing when you want to be there for the most part. So this is shifting our workforce into a hybrid office, and the hybrid office is probably here to stay for some time. They're choosing when they come, how long they come, if they add on a breakfast or a dinner, or if they do some shopping. And so we really want to make sure that we have that in our view when we're thinking about programming, activation, and access. Our local downtown visits have shifted a lot from daytime visits from our workers to now evening and weekends. We often hear reports about families spending a lot of time downtown at night and choosing to bring their family downtown, or even on the weekends. And that's something that data is that we're sharing with our stakeholders and with each other, and is helping to inform the strategies that we're implementing. We also see kind of a doubling down and an increased use of public spaces. This is something that directly came out of COVID, of people wanting to spend more time together. And we have not seen that change or go back. People are still using public spaces, spending more time outside, even in those colder months. So those are all things that we're considering as we're thinking about the strategies as we move forward. So we wanted to have a discussion a bit about some future planning and the things that we're thinking about. I want to get in some insight from this group as well. Some things that we're already talking about that you heard from the group is that we are starting to coordinate around the bus rapid transit project, also the Mayo Clinic expansion. We have collaborations around retail, dining, entertainment, recruitment, and then special topics as they come up. We're already thinking about those ahead of time. Before we get to the questions that we want to talk with you about, there are a few key takeaways that we just want to keep at top of mind. Is that this opportunity created task force opportunity created a way for us to collectively listen together. And that's something that we believe is the correct way to move forward and are committed to doing that. It is also just not something that we do for a new way of working together, for complex issues, but we find ourselves in sharing this in our communication strategies. So as Ryan said, urgent matters when there's an issue that comes up, or regular updates. We're excited to continue to work this way moving forward. And then as Cindy mentioned, we're also dedicating time to making sure that we're using data in our decision making. Oftentimes we have a lot of information thrown at us, or people saying you should do these things, and we're sort of taking that information and seeking out the tools and the data to help inform us so we can really make great decisions moving forward. So with that, we're hoping to have some discussion with this group. The first question is, how do you feel we're doing in responding to the stakeholder needs to the report that you've received? And then what other opportunities should we be working on together as we move forward?
All right, thank you, everyone. Obviously, collaboration and systems thinking is music to my ears, and I know it takes a lot to sometimes put your own organizational priorities as second to our shared priorities as a community. So really appreciate your work. Just wanted to give a special thanks to our staff who are making internal changes. I see you over there, Kristan, to improve our processes and make sure we're contributing meaningfully too. I'll open it up for discussion. Councilmember Bransford can start us off.
So a couple of the questions that you've asked here is kind of timely, because I recently spoke with a restaurateur who happens to exist in the middle of Soldiers Field, Townies. I'd like to see that added to the list because it's a fairly unique location. And whether or not it's Townies or some other endeavor, it's a really difficult place to do business, especially now, but in the future, it's a very critical place. It will be at the end of Discovery Walk. It's going to be in the center of what I kind of call our Central Park. It was a desired location for a restaurant. And I think I'd like to see that added to the list of new and varied kinds of restaurants that we need. And perhaps to have someone reach out and understand their challenges. I would appreciate that personally.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And it's a fairly unique location in the middle of a very exciting change in terms of the rebuild of the pool and all those other things. So appreciate it if we could put a little spotlight on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
Councilmember Wall?
Thank you. A lot of years ago, I moved to a town that liked to consider itself self-sufficient, full service. A little while before I got there, it lost its only car dealer. Many months after that, lost its only men's clothier and shoe store. And you could just feel the palpable grief on a main street about those services that were lost. That's my long way around asking, how do we try to ensure that central services are available downtown? As I know there's some grief that some of those services have abandoned the downtown area. Does that fall under anybody's bailiwick?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
In that question.
yeah, yeah. So in the four themes, the fourth theme is focused around grow downtown. And we want to think about retaining business and growing business. We formed a task force called Grow Downtown Together, or a working group, if you will, of different people to come together to talk about what that looks like. John mentioned, talked a little bit about how we are thinking about unused space, looking at the resources that we need in order to do that. So what's the technology? We've had a number of meetings now with Placer AI and others to help us understand what could we support, where are people shopping now, and that helps us to prioritize who to recruit to Rochester. We're working closely in understanding the businesses that are already here, what their needs are, and what do they think their complementary businesses that would help be successful models for that as well. We're also reaching out to other resources regarding recruitment strategies in other cities that have some similar needs to ours and their relationships and how we might begin to coordinate that recruitment. I will say where we're seeing great success. So when you look at downtowns, let me back up 1 second. When we hear about downtowns and being impacted by COVID, some might say downtowns are dying. But when you pull back that layer and look within the downtowns, there are lots of downtowns that are having pockets of success or different areas of success. And the ones that are thriving the most have really great public space, well curated first level retail, entertainment, dining, and dynamic programming. So those three things together are incredibly important. And so we're trying to address this piece of what is missing, how do we prioritize that, and then work with our partners to making sure that they're programmed well and give people other activities to do around that same side. That answers your question.
I think you were leaning more towards services for if we're living downtown, we want grocery stores and childcare and some of that sort of supportive
Sure.
context. Is that
Yes.
what you
Yep,
were
okay,
referencing?
sorry. Yeah, that would fall within that same bucket of work of recruitment and understanding what are the gaps. So earlier, we've done some research to understand what are the gaps for the people that are currently living downtown, and we have that list. And then as we're looking at who are these partners that can help us to recruit these companies downtown, we'll use that information plus the new data to help understand how we can, which ones we should prioritize and where they should go.
And if I may, I would also just kind of lean back to what Mr. Sieb said about a resident that lives downtown spends about 7 times more than someone who is a daytime experiencer downtown, maybe in the office type of space. And as you see more residential downtown, there would more naturally become even more of a market for some of those services, and being able to tell that story about what is here and what there's actually a lot of market and room for will really benefit from some of those additional housing opportunities coming into play in the downtown area, which you'll be talking about in your next item, and some of what the city council has been doing to invest in city-owned sites and how they might be supportive to some of that.
Thank you, Administrator Zums. I was actually going to jump up and share that. And to go along with that, as Jamie mentioned, the kind of technology that's out there. She mentioned Placer ID is one example we've been demoing. It helps you understand where people are coming from, how long they stay, and where they go after, right? So point of departure, origination, where they're going beyond. All of that is information that helps inform the recruitment process. So as Mr. Zump said, as more people start to come downtown, live downtown, you know, it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy of these markets. You know, the market becomes richer, you understand, and it makes recruitment a little bit easier in terms of trying to say your business X would fit great here because of what we know about how people are moving and where they can currently access those services.
Councilmember Palmer, was your question specific to this item?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. And then Councilmember Keen.
You had mentioned 3 cities or a couple cities that are doing well. Can you give me the names of those? Because I've not read that.
Sure. So I would talk about more like neighborhoods within cities. So for example, like North Loop in Minneapolis is doing extremely well, while Uptown is not doing well. Does that resonate with you, for example?
More like downtown cities. I mean, we have a downtown. I don't know if the North Loop would consider downtown.
Well, I think it's how the pockets are performing. I don't see, for example, well, an example is I recently visited Chicago, for example. It's a very large city, but there's areas and neighborhoods within that downtown that are doing extremely well, depending on how they're activating the space, how it's being curated. So that's what I was looking for when we were looking at this work, to say, what were the areas within downtowns that are being successful and why are they successful? And they have those different attributes to them. Again, where the public space is well designed and accessible, where the first floor is well curated, and that there's programming that helps to draw people to spend more time downtown. So sometimes you'll see people come into a downtown, for example, grab a bite to eat and leave. What we want to do is have people spend downtown, come downtown for a bite, and spend more time in the spaces. They might walk to another space for a retail experience or spend more time in a public space. We want them to spend more time while they're down here. So that's an example of, for example, like the North Loop neighborhood in the downtown that's doing well.
What I've read is that safety is the #1 factor for downtowns, and I guess I'm talking about old town downtowns like what we have in Rochester. I mean, so you could say West County Road 22 is doing great because that's a neighborhood, or by Miracle Mile, that's doing great. But I was looking for the downtown examples because all the information I've read, I've not heard of other downtowns doing so well. So when you said you had a couple, I was just interested in a city, not just a neighborhood.
Sure, and I wasn't considering a city as a whole. When I was studying other cities and what were successful, it was looking at, again, those neighborhoods within the downtowns of what was working well and what's not working well. And what's the differences between those pieces, and then how can we take those lessons to apply them to our own
But I
city?
think there's an important point there, because the North Loop has so much housing along with the retail, and it isn't just commercial office space. So
Absolutely.
that's part of what we're also talking about, is how do we make sure we're supporting housing downtown to get people consistently in downtown spending more.
Well, everything you read about, if we have 400,000 square feet of office space available and you want to move it into be residential, it's really difficult to do and expensive to do. And how do you incentivize that? And so I've not read anything of a downtown. And you say the downtown residents spend 7 times more than an employee. Do you have a study on that, or how do we know this?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Palmer, yes, that comes out of the Brookings Institute. Cliff Lineberger is the author of that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Also, to maybe that question, John Wade, that the other thing that we are doing my friend leaned over and said, what about a shoe store? What about a this? What about a that? And one of the best sources we have for recruitment, #1, we need to retain what we have and help those businesses. But as we look at recruitment, it's working with, and DMC and Ready have been working on this, our commercial realtors. Because a lot of the businesses that you see happen, and somebody from the government called somebody up and said, would you put a store here? It's because a commercial realtor contacted somebody because they want to sell the marketplace. And how do we better communicate with those commercial realtors that we have? I met with a couple, I think it was last week, that we're looking at about an $18 million purchase in downtown Rochester. And that was together with, were Minneapolis brokers here with a Rochester broker. We didn't have anything to do with it. They called and said, come in and do your shtick about how great we are. But that goes on, and how we better work with those commercial brokers, because they are out recruiting businesses and they do pay attention to the greatest out there that are available. Regarding you brought up another point, Councilmember Palmer, about the available square footage. We had a concerning amount of available office square footage not that many months ago. Mayo Clinic has reclaimed a lot of that space. And so for their future use, originally much of that space was going to be released or allowed back into the marketplace once their leases were up. They have changed their outlook on a number of those properties that we had originally when we did an assessment on that 400,000 square feet. By comparison, the Metro has about 13 million vacant square feet. Our challenges here are manageable, and even more so as Mayo Clinic has revisited some of those leases and intends to retain some of that space.
Councilmember Keen.
Oh, thank you. So the first is, how we're responding to stakeholder challenges. And I just love to see this idea of the 7 groups working together and just the disparity, the different skill groups that come together with the Ready is a very different operation than the city of Rochester or the Experienced Rochester working with Mayo. I think that's gonna pay off. And in a way, what I heard through this discussion was we started out at a task force, but we're finding operational things we can do, which I really like to hear that. I think that's important for going forward. As far as the city engagement, again, what's really gratifying for me here is we're talking about public safety and access and wayfinding, things that are our responsibility, and we should be working at improving how we do the things that are our responsibility. I really like to hear that over, like we need to get into another business. I think that's important for being an efficient city. The other thing, if I picture this as a comeback from what I perceive the early things, I cringe thinking it's going to be a long list of asks. And I really, appreciate and want to call out that we're looking at how do we do these things and who is the responsible group. And I think that's a really good way to do task force. And I commend the group for doing that. The second part was opportunities. And again, I go back to your original thing, continue to recover and build a more resilient downtown. And we started at the end here getting into discussion of stakeholders. And we kind of assumed through some of the discussion that they are the small business owners or the properties downtown. And they're not. They're now that we have changed to be like, if you go 15 years back, how many people live downtown? How many students are into the community for 9 months and then back out and back into the community? And it's a very different world than it was 15 or 20 years ago. I really feel for these businesses that built up. The bad example for me is the lunchtime business that someone's going to run out of an office, get their lunch and run back. It's just not there right now. And I don't think I want us, the city, or even these groups to say, okay, how are we going to make that work? I think we've got to look at like, how is the world changing and how do we react to it? And that's the tone I get out of this. So I'm glad to see that. I really have struggled to understand my obligations to what is downtown versus the city of Rochester. I certainly don't want to have policy that benefits a downtown hotel over somebody that built on the edge, where I just don't want to have recommendations come up to me like that. And I don't feel I'm getting them, but I really do watch for my responsibilities for downtown. I know people think they pay us to be downtown, but what they really pay is based on the value of their properties, which clearly are much more valuable than these other outlying properties. But I don't know if that's going to switch. I mean, that the idea is the markets work, and we're gonna, if it's not a good business environment, the values will go down, but we're not seeing that yet. When you talk about data driven, I mean, I would really love to understand this, like, slow migration to West Circle Drive of a set of businesses. It appears the downtown is thriving as a medical center, as a government center, as an education center, courts. But it is not thriving as where the realtors or the investment people or the financial consultants go. They seem to want a different environment. And I grew up in Chicago, and I saw the same thing happen downtown out to the first ring of suburbs. It could be parking, but I'd love to understand that and love to say that's where we're at. That's not changing. Or here's the task force recommendations to address that. Again, my sense is that's not true, but I'm not the data guy that would know something like that. As far as his closing comments, this thing about what John Wade says, this idea that I think we want to create an environment where people want to come to, but let's trust the private sector to come to it. And we want to figure out what they want, but this idea of bidding for them and all that is it's not a good game. But I think this idea of like, we're going to have this shared lab space, or we're going to have this, that someone's going to look and say, that's going to make me want to come. I think that's the kind of thing we want to be doing, as opposed to, 20 years of TIF if you come with this many jobs. And it's just not a good strategy for the long haul. So I appreciate that those aren't here, but I really, as far as that one thing, what are opportunities we should get together? And it's that idea of like, do we have the right stakeholders when we get together? Is it those businesses? Is it, some people say, oh, the only thing you guys care about is how much taxes you collect. Is it that sort of like amount of public space? What do those things lead towards? And again, those big changes coming, that there is more public space, that there's a bus rapid transit that's coming, that's making better connections. Those are the kind of things that, what do people say? Like, you want to figure out where the future's going and then be there. And I think that's what I'm hoping we're trying to do, and we continue to work together.
Thank you.
We have 3 more and then we will wrap up. Councilmember Kirkpatrick, then Dennis.
Thank you. Everybody has mentioned something that resonates with me, for sure. And to Mr. Keen's most recent little statement, how do we feel we are doing in responding to stakeholder needs? Who are the stakeholders? Somewhat rhetorical question. I consider absolutely every person that enters this city to be a stakeholder. It's not just downtown residents or businesses. It's not just Mayo. It's not just, particular groups. Every single individual is a stakeholder in our economy. That's what I believe. So I hope that's what you all are going after. Kind of a negative comment, don't mean it for it to be that way, but the flip side of that coin is, when I hear all of you getting together and working on this, I just felt this common thread, this desire, this motivation, this inspiration, this futuristic thinking to kind of bring us up, whether it's financially or whether it's through public engagement or just through emotions, making our city happier. And I'm biased, highly biased in my next comment, but from the font that Kathleen held up, it's a very historic font. It's something from Christmas that we remember from the 30s, 40s, or 50s. And then I hear about wayfinding, and I think about the subway vendors. Unfortunately, I have to share my ward with you, Mr. Bransford, now from redistricting, but I'm super proud to have the downtown because I live close, I walk, and I love downtown. But so this wayfinding piece that's there, I know that's a real concern, and it's been talked about for years. So I think that's a really important piece for all of you to work on, and getting those subway stores in there. And then Mr. Sieb was mentioning 20 new businesses. He listed off a lot of restaurants. I would like to understand what the percentage of restaurants is to some of those other needs that we have. Golly, I missed the Kmart because now I gotta leave like the downtown core to go get new wiper blades, or to go get, I don't know, new Halloween candy or something next year. And I don't like to leave that downtown area. I'm a downtowny person. So when I think about the learning, the visiting, the destination that we are, and here's the bias, I think about the 3 M's. No, not that company. The Mayo Medical Museum. And this common thread that I was thinking throughout what everybody was saying, I hope in that $4.4 billion plan, Dr. Bulbulian's really incredible artwork from the 1933 World's Fair can come back. We've got room for that. Imagine a QR code for wayfinding that talks about our history. We are known worldwide, #1 as the institution for med tech and medicine. How do we promote that, not just for our patients, but for our visitors, for our residents? I think that could be a real key. It gives another destination that we can go to, and tracking a QR code for wayfinding to find your way around. And then finally, perhaps maybe a little disappointed that Renee Halsey isn't here with our neighbors. I think we have an incredible neighborhood association in our city and the way it works. So when Mr. Palmer asked his question about other cities, and then Jamie, you mentioned the North Loop and then Uptown, I thought about our neighborhoods. We have not such a great functioning downtown neighborhood association, but those core neighborhoods, just the next ring out, Lower Town is super thriving. East Side is going through some really significant struggles with some of the things that are going to be happening in the near future right now. Slattery is known as this great, art area. And then we've got historic Southwest, which is going through some of its kind of pains with a growing city right now. So I'm wondering if Renee might be somebody to reach out to say, hey, what neighborhoods are thriving? What can we help out? What neighborhoods can contribute, or what do they want to see for our downtown area? Because those are the neighborhoods that are walkable, and actually consider coming downtown for, all the cool stuff that's there. So thank you to all of you for this collaboration and what you've done. I really appreciate it. I love my downtown. I also love my 10-acre agriculture that's on the south end of my ward, but downtown's pretty special. So thanks.
All right, Councilmember Dennis, and then the mayor will wrap us up with a brief comment.
All right, thank you. So I just want to echo a lot of what Councilmember Kirkpatrick said. The positivity, the connections is so important to do all the things that are wanting to be done. The one thing I really liked was RDA talking about seasons and how celebrating the seasons. I'm a theme person. I love themes. And I when you walk downtown, which I did this weekend, I saw the lights all beautiful. It was just like warming the heart, and I just love the lights of this time of year. I'm from Rapid City, so when you talk about seasons, right? The summer season with tourism and things like that is just a whole different downtown versus the winter season. But when I tell people, they say, "Oh, we're going to go see Mount Rushmore and whatnot," I tell them what to do downtown. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, go to the Native American History Museum, or the cultural arts, Native American art," and I've Prairie, yes, well, I'm just describing the what it is. I don't want to name drop all. I mean, yes, I love that Prairie Edge, but like the history museum for the when I went to Sioux Falls, I went to their medical history museum, and it was really neat. My kids just were engulfed in looking at all the different things that they had there in Sioux Falls. So I agree, having a museum, having more history of our city showcased, I think would be really wonderful. But even through all these platitudes and these feel good, last time I don't, I think it was 6 months ago, I remember vividly because it was caught on social media and sent out a lot to the city of Rochester. I was gavelled for speaking on things that we could improve on. And you can easily find that, I'm sure, if you Google. But when we are up here, I think that's our job, is not to necessarily always give the platitudes and the feel goods, but to be really critical and say, how are we going to best use taxpayer dollars? How are we going to really help Rochester become better? And so I love some of the ideas, but I love data as a high school science teacher. Data, marketing studies, things are important. But where I really find the data is the opinions when you go on to social media, which I'm not a huge social media person, but I see posts where we're going to start a business. What would we want to start? And there's, I don't know, you've probably seen that post, 100 people saying, "Oh, we need a buffet downtown. Oh my gosh, we need affordable things downtown. We need," and you just see the opinions, which I take in this situation equal, if not more important than the data, to see what the people are really wanting to have downtown. And so some of the things I've talked to a lot of people, I actually saw Mr. Wade downtown. I went to try out a couple of things and talk to the servers and people who are downtown this weekend and ask them just, "Hey, what do you think we need? What are we doing?" And I've heard many from people, but like just essential services. We talk about UPS and things leaving the county, what Councilmember Wall was talking about, where we don't have all the just places we can go to a drugstore besides Mayo Clinic to buy something, or shoes, clothes, dance clubs, jazz clubs. Low cost eating is one of the number one things they want somewhere to come in. Those buffets are really needed by people, or wanted by people. The thing that I have issue with when it comes to kids things, because I've been very vocal about more things for children to come downtown, for patients who are young or all ages to have things to do downtown. The thing for people to come down is the parking. When you have kids, you a lot of times need parking very close because of the needs. We just don't have the parking and the cost of downtown. You go to these wonderful events that I love, but you're not going to go down and bring your family with 3-4 kids. And I mean, how much is a hamburger? I mean, you go down to some of these Thursdays on First, and it would cost $100 to have a meal for a family. So I feel like the cost is a barrier for a lot of people I've talked to, the parking. So even if we did bring down, bring amazing events for younger people in our community, we have to conquer those barriers and challenges first. And then some of the things I kind of was thinking to just throw out there, my thoughts. I know I talked before about it being a very destination, more of an event downtown than a destination downtown. Like I come downtown a lot because they're events, but then what is downtown, right? So if you go to an event at the Civic Center, well, you may have parked right there at the library parking. So are you going to walk past your vehicle and go down? I mean, our downtown is so like not defined in my opinion. When like, is the library down? We have the libraries downtown, but if I'm going to go eat at the Well, which I tried out for the first time, I'm not going to necessarily say, oh, what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of just follow the yellow brick road and go to. I think we need to have those filling in of businesses to help people utilize everything. Because when I go to the library, I go to the library. I don't necessarily say, oh, I'm going to now go to eat at the Tap House. I'm going to be like, oh, well, it's cold out, it's January, like to walk. It's hard weekends or whatnot. So I feel there is some of that dynamics to determine what is downtown. And then also when we do have events downtown, when I've gone to small downtowns, a lot of them, everywhere I go, I try to go downtown, and they have these car shows, right? So they block off the whole downtown for the entire day or 2 days. Well, when we have more of this rapid transit, and it might be harder to do those kind of events where, well, are we going to block off the entire, and disrupt, services? So it's a little bit challenging for our city with the dynamic of how, needs. And then diversification, I mentioned this, I think 6 months ago, another elected official made the comment of, she calls it Mayo campus because it's so Mayo focused. And as Mayo grows and grows and grows, which is wonderful because we're so blessed to have Mayo Clinic in our town, I believe, really need to have diversification. Because if you're going to work at Mayo, you don't want to necessarily hang out with all the Mayo stuff, right? You want to go and have fun things to do, bookstores, toy stores, or things to do while you're not at Mayo. So that's another huge thing too, is just to see how can we maybe, I don't want to say limit, but make it so that there's a distinction between the destination downtown and then the Mayo world that is wonderful, but not necessarily you go there to hang out for joy and fun.
It's time to wrap up, Councilmember Dennis.
Yep, I have a couple more quick.
No, we only have about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I won't talk about some of the businesses I've talked to who their barriers, but the two things, or I'll just go to one thing. Well, not two things. When we sat back in 2021 and sold Dooley's, I know I was the only council member in that closed session who thought we should have competitive bidding.
And just point of order, you can't speak about a closed session.
Now, I have the recording. I mean, it can be sent out. So, but the Dooley's closed session, I was the only council member Councilmember Campion's not here and he wasn't in the closed session. But when there wasn't competitive bidding for Dooley's, when the owner wanted to buy it and everyone talked so wonderfully about what the this is where you don't want to hear what I have to say, and this is
point of order.
But I just want to say
Competitive bidding is not required for that type of purchase or sale of city property, and
but what I want to say is we never waited to see what happened with COVID before we sold that.
I appreciate your comments.
So many ideas.
We're going to turn it over to Mayor Norton. Thank you. Go ahead. You have a minute or so to wrap up.
I have questions about the papers as well.
I want to thank the folks from our group who've been meeting. Just for clarification for the council, Allison Zelms, your administrator, and I also attended these meetings regularly when we were all able to get together, which was actually quite often. I really appreciated that we moved from Rochester Ready, which was a city function that we had during the pandemic, to the downtown task force, because it enabled us to keep something that had been working, the communications that had been formed and built and that grew through this time. And I want to be really clear, we took information from not just the businesses, but also from community members throughout this process. And not only did we listen to them actively over many months, we reacted and we addressed the issues that they raised. Both residents, people who came downtown, as well as our businesses. I was proud of the work that we did. A couple things. Our downtown is doing quite well compared to others, but there are downtowns that are successfully rebounded from the pandemic. I met with them at the National League of Cities meeting recently, and I asked that question specifically. Not all of them. It's the range, and I think we're at the positive end of the range, particularly given the changes in workforce that we have in our downtown area, and I think we're addressing it appropriately. One of the things that is in the report that was touched on has to do with safety, and that we did utilize, and I know you know this, but I'm just going to say it for the record, we did utilize our police, our school resource officers throughout the summer downtown in order to address that issue. And that was very well received by the businesses and residents alike. And we are trying to, with this new downtown office for the police department, we will continue that presence, although it'll be somewhat different. But I think it's something we are going to have to address. And I think part of that will also be on the bus rapid transit that's coming into place. And to Councilmember Palmer's comments, I want to say it's yes and all of you have kind of touched on it. The needs for a cultural center downtown, we see that. If you, and I don't know how many of you came down to Latino Fest, what an outstanding and uplifting event it was. That place was crammed, and they were even saying, maybe we need a larger venue. And I said, but this was perfect. It was outside, it was inside, it activated the area. And if you went too big, you wouldn't feel that sense of joy and camaraderie that everybody felt on that day. And I would like to see more, not less, of that kind of activity. But again, it's not all RDA planning it. It's a community understanding that the chateau's a resource they can activate on their own, right? So I think we have some PR to do as a community on the use of those facilities down there, because it really was an exciting place to be. But downtowns are going to grow and thrive. They're changing. They're being different. People want experiences. It's something I've been to a couple of the online, workshops about development. People want experiences post-pandemic. They want to be activated. They want to have light. They want to have music. They want to do something, and we need to respond to that. So, I think that's more of the future. And we need places that aren't downtown in our communities to thrive too. The one thing I just want to dispel, because I was really disappointed to hear it mentioned, we have addressed the parking issue. And what we found is that we actually have a lot of parking. We're giving 2 hours free now, but continuing to repeat that there's a parking problem downtown is detrimental to the growth and excitement of downtown. We have parking, hundreds and hundreds of places a day. And one of our parking garages shows it every day, how many places are open. So please don't continue to share that misrepresentation. We have parking, we have 2 hours free during the holiday season, and we provided off and on other opportunities for people to park. So it's down there along with street parking, which I use all the time, and there's street parking available as well. So anyway,
Mayor,
just want to thank
that clarification.
the members of the group for coming and presenting today, and for all the hard work that everybody put into this to make our community better.
I need clarification.
Mayor,
This
we're
is
gonna move
residents'
on.
words. They're concerned about parking. It's not my words. Residents have expressed those concerns to me.
Councilmember Dennis, you are out of order. You are done. We
I
are
have to
so
prevent misinformation.
pleased to welcome everybody that's leaving, and really great work, everyone. But
Thank you.
Pleased to welcome our next speaker, who I know is visiting us and in town to share some updates. And I know he shared them at our DMC meeting last week. So thank you, Mr. Gamble, for being here. And Ms. Woodward, you'll kick us off for Riverfront discussion, which I know has done an analysis of parking. So good transition point, Mayor Norton.
Good.
Council President, Mayor, members of council, thank you. Irene Woodward, Community Development. We are here today to kind of give a riverfront small area plan update. There's been a lot of work being done on this and wanted to give you guys an opportunity to show where that work is coming from. David Gamble from Gamble Associates is also joining me and will take on part of this presentation. So the first thing I just kind of wanted to start with was kind of going back to the prior policy actions and all of the work and kind of from where council has made this a priority in terms of the various plans and going all the way back to the downtown master plan from 2012 and mentioning the riverfront and this need to really look at this space. And then really in 2021, issuing an RFP to try and find a consultant to bring on to really look at this riverfront plan. And then the unanimous adoption of the plan in 2022. And then the continuation of the work with Gamble Associates starting in early 2023 of kind of continuing some additional work and some analysis as we move forward. The other, just wanted to bring forward, it is an award-winning plan. It actually received recognition from the Boston Society of Architecture that Gamble Associates represented in looking at receiving top honors in campus and urban planning category, so which is really exciting opportunity. The plan really focuses on the natural resources and the existing historic buildings and how these two sites that are predominantly parking can be revitalized and reused. And how that mix of commercial, residential, and recreational spaces kind of come together, which you guys are somewhat familiar with. And I also just wanted to spend just a moment really talking about all of the engagement that took place during the planning process. There was a lot of opportunities for the community to engage in that process. And we continue to engage with the community, whether it be UMR students getting some feedback, business owners, and continuing those conversations as we move through this process, and really making sure that there's that feedback along the way. And with this, I'll kind of transfer it over to David, who will kind of take on the next part of this presentation.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you again. It's been almost exactly 16 months to the day that the council unanimously improved our plan. And while it's nice to get accolades, what I'm most proud of is that the plan really accurately reflected the community's aspirations and the dynamics and the politics of the place. So just as a reminder, the image that you're looking at here, there are two sites to this small area plan, not to be confused with the small area plan that's 60 acres to the south of us. Together, on the right-hand side, the east side is about 3 acres. The west side, which is the location of the 2nd Street ramp behind the Indigo Hotel and adjacent to the Red Out Time Theater, that's about 2.5 acres. So around 5.5 acres together. As the well-known urbanist Jane Jacobs talked about, waterfronts are not things unto themselves. They actually connect things together. And that's what's so powerful about this project, is it really lies at the kind of midpoint between Soldiers Field and Silver Lake. It's a missing link in the naturalization of your downtown. So what's in Burgundy is the development potential. While there's a lot of green space, you could get between $500,000 and $750,000 of investment if, in fact, the public realm is a place where one wants to be. And that relates to the conversation you just had. Successful downtowns create places where people like to linger and be. And I think Rochester actually needs a little bit more of that. And this site, directly at the origin point where Rochester began, has a lot of symbolism there. And I think people recognize that potential. There were 5 principles that came out of the process through a lot of dialogue. These principles come to ground then on this riverfront transformation. This image is looking at the west site, so the Red Out Time Theater on your left-hand side. This is floating up above 4th Street. You're looking at what could be a good deal of development adjacent to a revitalized river. The first time I came to Rochester, I asked someone, could you tell me where the Zumbro is? And they said, what Zumbro? What river? They didn't even know it was there. And in fact, it's hard to see in many cases. That shouldn't be the point. Rochester deserves better. And this site at the bend of the Zumbro is a great opportunity to make that connection. And the capital intensive, heavy infrastructural investments from the 20th century actually isn't enough anymore. There's ways that interface between the river and the development sites can be made much more synergistic. We were preserving portions of the Red Owl Time Theater. There was a notion of a large third space, not work, not where you live, but actually another space. We called it a winter garden that could connect there, preserving panels of art that are there today, and really trying to put nature at the forefront of the design. And city centers across the country are looking, when you talk about redevelopment, revitalization, more often than not, you're talking about waterfronts. These former sites that are, this is 90% impervious surface, these two sites are almost all surface parking. Is that really what's the highest and best use so close to your downtown? And yes, this is downtown. So we had six scopes of work that we've been working on the last 9 months. I'll go through these quite briefly. The first one is just start to do more things there now. Change people's perceptions. This is on 4th Street, next to the alleyway and the Red Owl. There are things that can be done. Tactical urbanism, you're doing this now in different locations. RDA is programming these spaces. These things can happen immediately. So we're working with the business owners and the residents to try to reorient what are the backsides of buildings to face the waterfront. You can do a lot with lighting and signage and, well, the art installation, the lighting installation at the DMC annual meeting a year ago, murals. These things really help to change people's perceptions, and that is the first step. Our landscape architects, SWA, transformed a street in Laguna Beach, and today it's been so successful that they've kept it closed off to cars. I can't resist the urge to agree with the mayor that towns and cities that try to solve their parking problem actually make it worse. What Rochester needs is a better, more robust network of pedestrian spaces that are well connected and resilient, and the parking will come. This image then, this is a new image that I just want to explain briefly. So remember we had talked about a large tower on the west side of the 2nd Street ramp. A lot has to be reconciled here. The skyway that comes from this building across 2nd Street isn't even ADA accessible. You know, that ramp is a little forlorn, directly adjacent to your library and civic center. The project is about using the orange line is about the skyway actually becoming better connected to the things around it, even coming across and connecting to this, what could be a cultural project. And that is actually something that came up in the Mayor's Institute conversation years ago, is this is a cultural project, not just an economic one. It's amazing when you think about the art center, the civic center, the library. You know, if you turn the corner, I don't know if it is a medical museum, that'd be amazing, or a children's museum, that would be amazing. Something that actually contributes back to the life of the city. And we heard that a lot in the conversations with the community, a cultural anchor, an institutional anchor of some kind. Even the depot, those blue boxes start to create a critical mass that I think would be a destination for people to come for all kinds of events. So this was an image we were working with. Our team is much larger. It's more local. WSB engineers have been working on the engineering. Colleagues at Kraus Anderson did some cost estimates. We were looking at what it would take to make the Red Owl Time Theater vanilla boxes, white boxes, poised for redevelopment. It's about $7.5 to $8 million to do that. That includes removing the back portion of the concrete block that's compromised to those buildings now and preparing for some type of new user. One of the residents said, our business owners, wouldn't it be great to see outdoor movies? Well, imagine the poetic kind of metaphor of that when the Times Theater, you know, initially was about movies. Could you create movies on the new landscape here, adaptively reusing those buildings? The east site, just to our right here, the parking lot, is actually a little bit easier. There's no river wall. There's less historic preservation. There is a neighborhood there. A lot of the residents that we spoke to said, we need more density. We actually need more activity here because the walk along 4th Street feels like the downtown does end pretty abruptly. If this site were redeveloped, and I'm not sure which of these scenarios it would be, that would grow your downtown and activate the trails and the landscape.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. The closed captioning seems to have stopped for those residents who would need that service.
It's on Zoom.
Is it on Zoom?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
I'm glad I don't see it up there
Okay,
because it would make me hesitate. No. So these are 4 different scenarios of redevelopment of the east site, it's again, 3.5 acres. How tall that goes actually depends a little bit on the soils. So we can share with you a 374-page report, but essentially the good news is this is mostly alluvial plain. The soils that were here are characteristic of the geological formations of the region. That is to say, you've got bedrock at about 40 feet below. So very tall buildings would likely need piles. If it's 4 to 5 story or traditional wood frame construction, you're talking about spread footings. So the good news is we didn't find any surprises in the 15. This image represents the 15 borings that we spent a week and a half back in July digging down. And the soils, again, pavement, fills, organics, alluvial deposits until you get to the bedrock. So the orange is, you go down, and if there were taller buildings, they could actually be supported, although the engineers always put lots of asterisks that more study is needed, but that was the first part. The second one is about working with the Corps of Engineers. You all asked good questions. Can you even do what you're showing here? Well, we were pleasantly surprised about the warm reception and the fact that by removing that second wall, it's 10 to 18 feet tall in this diagram in the section that you're looking to the right, that's the trail network and then the wall. By tapering that back, you're actually increasing the flood capacity at the bend of the river. It actually does, you get a no rise in the case of a 200-year flood. Well, it's actually 0.2%, but it's below the threshold that would trigger any sort of DNR or Corps of Engineers permitting beyond that. So this kind of colorful drawing shows the speed of the river as it goes through your downtown. The warmer colors are faster, the cooler colors are slower. So blue, what you're seeing there, blue would be on a 200-year flood, and it stops short of what would be those development pads. So again, the good news from a kind of regulatory perspective is we can do what's being shown here, which is make a better connection to your river and taper down so you can actually see it. And then lastly, every time I come to Rochester, I'm just amazed at how much is going on. It's probably the greatest challenge is coordinating, aligning, building off of these efforts. And we do think that this project, while adding to all of the other things that you have going on in the city, actually starts to form a conduit of connectivity. And so in the pink images there, that's over 1,000 units of housing in the last 10 years. The orange are potential developments. So the site here, look, floating over Bear Creek, it actually starts to tie these investments together into a network. And that's why we're so bullish and excited about the opportunity. So we're concluding the engineering research. We're finalizing kind of the design pieces here. We are looking to advance the interim site activation or what we're calling pre-development infrastructure already for next summer, how to get more people out there. We're in the process of drafting an RFP and an RFQ for redevelopment, and that's something we should talk about as a group. And then this site works at a variety of scales, including the scale of the watershed. And yes, every time I come here, there's more and more buildup in the river that has to be dredged at a cost every 3 years. So there are longer term solutions to deal with that, and even some shorter things that can be done to make it be a river that flows through your downtown and doesn't just accrue sediment. And we're excited to talk more about that. Thank you.
So one of the items that we're still looking at is the timing of the RFP, RFQ. We're looking at kind of market conditions when makes sense. So we're kind of looking at first or second quarter of next year in terms of when that would make sense to issue and what does that look like. And then the other thing, obviously David mentioned, we're starting to look at that Zumbro River function. And then the last thing is the securing capital support. And as many are familiar with, it is a bonding priority. And so I just wanted to identify that this has been listed as a bonding request, and looking at Riverfront Trail extending from Silver Lake all the way down to Soldiers Field, to the demolition of the 2nd Street ramp and that connection of that skyway to improve that ADA accessibility, the Riverfront Public Realm, and then the Red Owl Time Theater redevelopment and kind of that white box in preparation for a potential tenant. So all of these, the proposal within the bonding is all for that infrastructure work to help support finding a developer who would bring in that additional housing, retail, and commercial space. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Can you keep it on that last slide for
Certainly.
questions? Okay, I'm going to start it off and then I will turn it over to my colleagues. So what other information are you working on, Mr. Gamble, before we get the RFP out? Like what else do we have to know about the site?
So I think we're just finalizing kind of all of those studies and pulling them together and then drafting that RFP, RFQ, using those design principles and that information that we're gathering so that there aren't any surprises, and then preparation. So we should have that, a draft coming forward, but then we're looking at the timing of when it's best to issue, but we are pulling that information together.
So it's really just synthesizing all the data at this point that you're done with the data collection?
There's a lot of backup material, but it's an active synthesis and representation. So we do a lot of RFP preparations. It never fails to astound me that developers will come in with radically different visions than you imagined. However, if you set the parameters right, if the principles are clear, you'll find that helps to winnow in the range of alternatives.
Right, we don't want to get to a situation where we've done all this thoughtful work in developing a plan or at least a vision and then have something totally different proposed. So glad you're being thoughtful about it. And then just remind me, the Red Owl Time Theater development, that's the white boxing as well as the build out of that sort of greenhouse atrium. What are we calling that?
The placeholder term is a winter garden, but it could be lots of things, an all-season room, event space. Yeah, about $8 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
within that 15.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, Councilmember Palmer, then Keen.
One thing that we've done a lot of tours down there, we always start them out in the parking lot. And I think what we really need to do is start them on Third Street and head them east, because you have beautiful Third Street and all of a sudden you come to this ugly parking lot. And so I don't think that people see that. They just see an ugly parking lot and they don't imagine it's just a small continuation off of Third Street. One other question is, on the flood control, there's a relief, there's a waterfall. Is that would you say that's staying, or is that going to get removed?
That's staying for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there anything we can do on the Time Theater, Red Owl building right now that we could do something cheaply to get people in there to use it? Because you were talking like next summer, reusing that.
There are some things we can do to activate, yes, the back side of that, which should be the front, early next summer. But in terms of occupying a full 20,000 square foot, I would not suggest it. I think there's code issues that we need to work through.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But that building's rehabilitation needs to happen in tandem with the vision for the landscape, because suddenly it'll be reoriented to the old mill race that used to be there.
Correct. Thank you.
Well, Councilmember Keen.
Yes, thanks. Hey, some real just base things here. Your soil discussion, and again, I don't want to be too cynical, but it sounded like that's a cost impact if you want to build higher. But it would seem to me that we're not trying to build higher in those areas. Well, you said that it would support building at this. So I read that to mean, but if you're going to go higher, you've got to go deeper. These are cost impacts.
That is true. Yeah, a larger scale development steel frame construction will require different foundations that will likely have to go down to bedrock.
And that sounds like that's an expense thing that's going to be a part of the cost of a project.
It would be, but it's also a riverfront site, so I think development pressures would likely warrant that investment.
Okay. One of the things that I have trouble following this project is that split between the east and west. And I think, Ms. Woodward, you talk about the bonding, but that's almost exclusively on the west.
I would say the majority is on the west side, besides some of the trail connections and making sure, but the majority of that bonding request would be on the west side.
Okay. And then the flip side of this is the place to the east is a little more the residential, and it seemed like earlier on, it was the more likely thing to develop sooner. And that's probably where the focus of the RFQ is?
Yeah, so some of that discussion is whether there's one RFP or two, and really if that makes sense to separate those. And those are some of the things that we're kind of going through and evaluating what makes sense in terms of that east site would be a little bit easier to develop. So that could go at a separate time.
Okay, because that's how I had it like in my head from probably 2 years ago, that it was going to be this scaffold project starting from the east, moving towards the more public realm in the west.
Yeah, we're looking at both ways,
Okay.
whether it makes sense to put them together. So you have that east side that might be a bit easier to develop, but then you're also kind of integrating with the west side, or if it makes sense to have those two. So those are some of that work we're still working
Good,
through.
good. It's good that you're working through it. This is a small thing, but just on some of the drawings, they're probably conceptual, but you're trying to show some of the Skyway links and that's good. But maybe I was reading too deep and saying some of the Skyway links were going away. Like I didn't see a way to get to Indigo anymore, or is that just, we just stopped drawing at that point?
I don't think that connection would go away. I think what we're trying to show is that there would be improved connections with the Skyway and also potentially connecting down to the Red Owl Time Theater. So that connection would exist.
Okay, I know in some of our discussions prior, there was this view of like Skyway things and it's valuable. Are we still perceiving this as a valuable thing to have and make sure it's in a big part of this? Or is it like where it makes sense, we're doing it? It's not a design like imperative that we do more links. We're not looking to link from the east side Skyway across Third Avenue or anything like that.
No, I think we were looking at potentially, is there a connection point to the Red Owl Time Theater into the Indigo in that continuation? So as part of that larger, it's how do we make a better connection, but also more ADA accessible?
Okay.
Yeah, you can see it on this slide that
Yeah,
it connects into the.
As an urbanist, I wanted to really hate the Skyway system. But
I remember
I wouldn't say I've
Yeah.
come to love it, but I understand its value. And wouldn't it be great if it actually didn't stop unceremoniously at a little office tower, but it landed at your origin point, which was a destination for people of, residents and business owners and third space people. And I think it's at that point, you're just a hop, skip and a jump to connect to the other Skyway across the way. So there's almost like a very tight knit network of public space. So
Okay.
no, we're not suggesting getting rid of it. I think we
Good.
could grow it.
I just saw one of the drawings that looked like it didn't go through and I didn't think it was happening. I thought it was just conceptual.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you wrap up? We've
Um,
got.
Yeah, just last thing, and my memory is we kept the Red Owl with the idea that we're trying to make this work. I don't think we've made that decision or know that it's gonna work. Can you comment on that?
Well, the decision was to rehabilitate the Red Owl, to keep the facade of the Time Theater, and the opening of the Time Theater under the old marquee becomes the new entry point down to the trail, which you can't get to now. So we preserve the facade. It's called a facadectomy of the Time Theater. We show movies outdoors. We hold that corner, but it's the Red Owl that can actually extend out into the Winter Garden. So
All right, I'll
it's a
just leave
hybrid.
that's good. I don't want to burn too much time, but it's my memory that that was going to be part of an RFQ to see if that could work. And now I hear it as like, no, okay, so some of us are remembering it a little different.
Yep.
I think it might have been this RFQ that David's team is working on, and he has demonstrated that it can work. Not
So
from
as
a
part of this
developer.
work, there was also a bit of a structural analysis done, and I think that's part of what you're referring to of like what can be accomplished there and within that.
Okay, yeah, I don't mean to say that I'm like trying to not do it at all, but the language has changed towards we are versus we might.
Exactly. I agree.
I would not say intentionally. There's a logic to pairing the two sites together because the east side is larger. It's a little bit easier to do. It might help to cross subsidize the cost of rehabilitation of the Red Owl. That without tethered to the east side is going to require more development pressure on its own. So as Irene said, we're trying to work through those dynamics. There's a lot of complications there. There's a lot of opportunity, but the west side is harder.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Thanks.
Right, Mayor Norton?
Yeah, well, I want to start by echoing what Councilmember Keen said, is that we said it would be open to either, and that we would see what RFPs came in and who was interested. And if somebody had a great idea and those buildings weren't there and it was feasible and affordable, we would consider it. That was the discussion I recall. I think we have a great opportunity with the students moving closer to that area downtown. So I think as we think about this space, keeping those students in mind, which are now, it's a larger, continuing to be a larger group, and it's right there at the former DoubleTree. So I think that would be interesting for activation. I had a question about the balcony, the current balcony space, and I was trying to gather, look at that. Is that going to be like removed? That because we've had some accidents of that balcony that overhangs the walkway, And I would love for that to go away and for us not to have to think about
Yeah,
that.
it should come down. It
Okay.
should go away. It's not even ADA accessible to get through there.
Okay, so that, I appreciate that. I think I will just leave it at, the other side, on the other side, because we are interested in building, housing downtown. Are we looking at like a mixed income? I mean, do we have any ideas about what that would be? Because we know we need workforce, we know we need affordable, we know we need, right, a variety of housings. What are you looking at there?
I don't think we have the specifics, but we anticipate a mix of housing, including affordable, you know, and the whole
Senior.
range in the senior. Yeah. So I think our anticipation is recognizing what we've identified as the needs and being able to include that in the RFP, RFQ as well.
Okay, terrific,
Would be
thanks.
awesome. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you so much. I just love some of the things you're saying about the winter gardens and murals and nature, and of course, in the where they talk on the news, loneliness and is like mental health is such a crisis, and so having more nature is a healing and amazing thing for our city. So thank you for all of that intertwining. I see some of these pictures, you know, with the tall buildings. I know this was talked before when I've talked to people. What would you like to see downtown? They want a public place where they can go high up and have a view. That's a wonderful thing in some cities where you can just, you know, not have to go up the Mayo Clinic. You can go on a Saturday and have like a place you can have a cup of coffee and have a view of the city. So just an idea to throw that back out there because that was things brought up to me from people. And then not to go into the parking, but accessible parking, not, you know, make sure that it's accessible parking, because I mean, we have a lot of parking, but people just can't get to it that I've talked to. And then the one issue that I just wanted to bring up too, well, there's a lot of other things, but the one thing, oh, and the outdoor movies and events, thank you, those are phenomenal. The smell, when I was asking people what they did not like about the waterfront, and they said, when they go on bike rides, when they're done, the smell. And I thought, oh, that's a, you know, a sensory thing. Of course, that's a issue too, when we look at the beautification of this area. But is there something to be looked at to help with that? I'm not sure the cause, if it's pollution, if it's agriculture, if it's, I don't know the cause, but whatever is causing this unpleasant smell that people that I've talked to want to get rid of. So has that been looked at to help, you know, bring people downtown?
I suspect what it is the accretion of the deposits, the sediment in the river. I think what could be done is, in the core and DNR would be amenable to this, is if you actually dug out deeper portions of that and then allow the sides to be more naturalized. It's one way to remove the flat bottom that you currently have, which is exacerbating the buildup, and allowing it to be deeper so the water moves more quickly through the center, and it would mean the naturalized edges start to emerge. So it's a lot hard to imagine without some imagery, but there's a solution there, and I think it would be a more sustainable way to deal with the site.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder that we do have sales tax that's committed to flood control and water quality.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. Councilmember Palmer?
Well, that's designed, that curve there is designed to drop the sediment. And so as President Carlson said, if we can go upstream and keep the erosion from coming down. And I think Mr. Keene and the mayor are a little confused that we did override a veto to tear those buildings down. And so if we went to overrode that veto, we would have had a parking lot there still sitting there. So I'm glad at least we preserved the building to have some options. So that was a city council decision. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, this is great. It's really hopeful and exciting, and looking forward to the continued updates and just how this will add so much vibrancy along our river corridor into the rest of downtown, which is just spot on for tying these two items together. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we will wrap it up just a little over time. And I'll turn it over to Administrator Zelms to talk us through study sessions for the last couple weeks.
Council President, council members, Mayor Norton, just wanted to point out that on the 27th, on Monday, following Thanksgiving holiday, you have the last of your meetings with Bethany von Steinberg. That is in the Prairie House. So that's not in the Quarry Hill building. It's a little beyond the Quarry Hill building. So you may want to consider that in your travel time of getting there. We won't start without you, but it will take you an extra approximately 10, 15 minutes, and think about wearing comfortable shoes, etc. There's some indoor, outdoor in that space, and as you might expect at a nature center. So that will be forthcoming on the 27th. And then on December 4th, we are anticipating having a closed session to talk about engaging in some conversations about PFAS. So just be aware of that. Hopefully I was allowed to say that. I did.
On which date?
On December 4th. And then you do have another meeting on December 11th. So that's what we'd be looking at.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned and we'll see you back here at 7.
Recording stopped.